whether the executives and the anchors say there was a deal or not, there was a detente, there was a truth just visible to viewers. It was obvious. Whether how it happened, how long it took to happen, who made the deal, those are all questions that the companies haven't directly answered. But it was visible that two of the biggest media companies in the country had decided, for whatever reason and in whatever way, to stop the verbal combat that had basically defined Keith Olbermann, which had bedeviled Bill O'Reilly for years. Eventually, the companies acknowledged that they wanted to be more civil. Whose idea it was, who wanted to do it first, again, all up for debate. Neither of these guys are totally comfortable with each other. Neither of them are going to acknowledge that the other side is doing anything right. But I wrote about this deal on the front page on August 1st, kind of knowing that it was going to break down as soon as I wrote about it. It was obvious that if we revealed there was an agreement between these two companies, the people who were on TV representing these companies were going to want to show some independence. Keith Olbermann, for one, said he was a party to no deal. He had almost completely stopped his attacks on Fox, but I'll take him at his word that he was a party to no deal. However, GE later acknowledged there was some kind of agreement, so I'm not entirely sure how that works. And I had asked Keith Olbermann, what's your definition of a deal? Unfortunately, he hasn't responded yet. He's no longer answering my questions. Also asked the same questions of Fox, and they're mostly unhelpful, but they did say in a statement last week that this is not about journalism, this is not about freedom of speech, it's about corporate responsibility. And I think this is where the challenge becomes very visible in defining corporate pressure. I believe there is corporate pressure inside, for example, NBC News, not to cover Fox as a news story. And so one thing I reported last week was that this deal just wasn't just about Olbermann and Bill O'Reilly. It extended to daytime news hours. It extended to what we call newscasts, the closest thing cable news has to newscasts. If you're a producer at MSNBC in July and you wanted to cover how crazy conservative talk radio hosts are or were, you were allowed to do that, but don't mention content. Now, you could say that's not an editorialistic thing. Many people inside MSNBC thought it was. And it did provoke some concern inside these networks about how this deal was affecting news coverage. Both networks, by the way, say that there was an exception to the deal to allow each other to cover the parent companies. If GE does something stupid or if News Corp does something stupid, we're allowed to cover it. And in fact, when Glenn Beck called the president a racist, MSNBC jumped all over it because it was considered news. But it was clear that there was some kind of corporate influence here. What I thought was really interesting as I talked to sources at the networks, again, who were anonymous, but who were trusted, who were in touch with me for years, they kept bringing up the war in Iraq. And it surprised me that they were drawing parallels between what seemed to be a rather innocuous deal between two companies and the coverage of the war, especially the coverage of the run-up to the war in 2003, where some former employees have said, yeah, we felt pressure from above to cover the war in a certain way. Whether you think that a deal between GE and News Corp to stop the fighting of two anchors is a positive or negative, clearly any influence of news coverage around to a war would adversely affect the public discourse about that war. And I don't think we've ever fully come to terms with those news organizations for how they felt that pressure. Katie Couric, for instance, has said, and I was struck when she said this last year, that she sensed pressure in the corporations who own where we work to really squash any kind of dissent or any questioning of it. Now, she was working on the Today Show at the time. There's a number of other NBC employees who have now said, we did feel pressure from above. Again, sometimes that pressure may be positive. And I'm not the one to say that having a deal to stop Olbermann and O'Reilly is a good or a bad thing. But you have to look back in 2003 and the run to the war, where these employees say that the pressure was much less innocuous, was much more serious. And you have to wonder if GE can be trusted, for example, when they say they never interfere. Or if News Corp can be trusted when it talks about how it handles Fox News. To sum up, I would point out that what we're seeing right now in cable news is, to me, fascinating. And it's never been so clear to viewers where these channels stand. Fox News seems in the past few months, and I was struck when one of the morning anchors said this out loud, that they feel the need to balance MSNBC. That's a real reversal from slogan, which is fair and balanced. Whether you believe that slogan or not, many viewers do, that Fox News presents a completely objective and fair view of the world. When they say they have to balance MSNBC, they're no longer doing what they said they've done for the past 13 years. I think it's really striking in the past year how we now have these two diametrically opposed news organizations that are fighting each other. They go from balanced to balanced. Just that one loss in that one letter, the last letter there, to be now balanced in each other is a really stark change for cable, and that's why I continue to love and talk about it.